Well, listen, thank you for joining us. Thanks for coming out from the West Coast. So Amy, just please, first of all, whilst I warm myself up, just can you introduce yourselves and then a little bit about what you do at Guidewire?
Sure. So my name's Amy Mollin, and I am head of product management for Guidewire applications, which means my team is responsible for our roadmap. So if any of you are customers out in the audience and you have complaints, you can see me later. And our overall product strategy. In my spare time, one of the things that I'm heading up within Guidewire is our efforts on generative AI specifically. So how are we approaching that and making it part of our platform? My background in insurance is almost all at Guidewire, or as actually all at Guidewire, but I've been there for almost 14 years now, which is fairly extraordinary, both in insurance and in the software industry.
Which part's extraordinary?
That I've been there for that long.
I've worked for one company for 20 years. That's pretty extraordinary. So we've already heard from the panel and from Charles, but we were going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges you're seeing from clients. So you're out there, you're helping your clients make improvements, you're looking for opportunities to grow. If you could articulate this in sort of, not in one sentence, but in just one, the biggest, if you had to choose the biggest issue that people are trying to solve this year, what would that be, your clients?
The biggest issue, so we hear about a few different things this year. So by the nature of who Guidewire is, I would be remiss if one of the big challenges wasn't cloud transformation. So we had the discussion about those legacy systems. Those are not cloud-based systems, by and large, that people are complaining about. So that is a big topic with our customers and with the market in general when we talk to people who aren't our customers. That idea of legacy transformation and cloud transformation in particular is still a big topic in the industry. I don't think we can get around that. More specific to underwriting, I think looking at a comprehensive system for underwriting, and we've heard some about that, bringing together this idea of business process orchestration with what is the experience like for the underwriter, and then layering on, and one of the customers that we're working with on an early pilot is especially looking at how do they do things more consistently. So one of their big questions is, I've got a team of underwriters or group of underwriters that do this, but I don't always get consistent looks at how we do risk analysis. So that's another thing that we're seeing in underwriting. And then from there, talking about SME, how do we move the premium up a little bit that we can do with straight-through processing? Guidewire has a history of doing really well at straight-through processing for small personal lines policies. What we're seeing is more and more desire to move that up the scale in commercial lines and apply some of those same techniques to commercial lines to see if you can still get and maintain the underwriting profitability, but do more of the commercial lines business in that straight-through processing way.
Okay, and a few points in there, so I just want to come back, maybe just spend a bit of time on each of them. So let's talk about cloud. I know you're moving your clients to cloud with Guidewire. I know for a lot of people in the room, they'll be within organizations that are partially moving to cloud, probably haven't wholly moved to cloud. Again, let's frame it from the advice to people in the room, what you've seen or what Guidewire's seen. How can, it's not going to be easy, but how can you help people guide their organization or get their own head around the move to cloud?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is that the most successful transformations have one of two things happening. First, they have either a particular part of the business or part of the book that for some reason desperately needs that technical transformation. So it's gotten to a point where they can actually see the impact on profitability of the book of business, and they're actually the technical limitations that they can draw a straight line to impact on profitability, whether that is loss adjustment expense on the claim side, or whether it is underwriting and some of the issues there or actually changing product and getting new product into the market, whatever that is. So customers that have a part of the book that they're going to transform because there is a desperate sort of business need, we have to do this in order to make our numbers and keep growing, right? That's one thing that can be a really galvanizing event and make it really successful. A second thing that happens is where a customer wants a new business that they're going to start, right? So instead of thinking about it as there's a part of the book that is underperforming, the other thing is we're going to go into a new business. We actually saw this for a while with small business, the SME stuff. We saw a bunch of carriers wanting to get into there and trying to offer new products in that space. Those are two things that quite often kind of focus the effort. And I think those two both have the quality of having a really clear outcome that somebody is looking for. So it is not just, oh, I turned it on and it's on the cloud and everybody's happy. It's, we turned it on, it's on the cloud, and now my business is seeing these outcomes. Now, that can be a variety of things. It can be a better experience for claims handlers. It can be a better experience for underwriters. You can get better underwriting efficiency in some cases. It can be a variety of different things. Outcomes look different in different businesses at different times. But you need that, you need something that gives you a sense of, was this successful or not? And what we see is that in businesses that have that, it is, they go faster, they make better decisions, they go faster in their implementations, it's less costly because they don't spend time on stuff that doesn't help them get to that outcome.
So it's kind of slightly obvious, but I mean, the recommendation is if you're going to do a project, start with thinking, how can I make this be successful? And to some extent, what's within the capability of the organization and the technology, and then measure yourself against that as a success. And don't be too ambitious on the move to cloud, but also what you're saying in there, don't shy away from it as well. I mean, there's certain areas that are sort of greenfield or different that you can go after. That'd be a fair summary of.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, define what success looks like, and then everybody in the organization should be laser focused on making things look like that.
And then just come back to something Megan mentioned in passing, and you were also talking about it before. You framed it in terms of accuracy and trust. And how are you helping your customers give confidence internally to their colleagues around the analytics you're providing? You know, and particularly, how do people make decisions with uncertainty? Because I think all of us in the room will understand you very rarely get a binary 100% guaranteed output when you want to make a decision. You've got to understand the uncertainty and then make a decision on uncertainty. So how are you helping people with that?
Yeah, so we see this all the way through the insurance life cycle. So from the underwriting process all the way through to claims. If you've ever tried to put a new claim screen in front of your claims handlers with an analytic on it that suggests what action they maybe should take based on the data, based on the claim, and gotten the reaction from the people who've been doing it for 20 plus years, you know, like that idea of trust is a big one, right? So we have really fallen back in the way that we have put this out there on the idea of augmentation. It is give everyone the data. And then the other thing that we think about is make those users the heroes. And as soon as you make them more successful, they will start trusting you in some way, right? And trusting the data in some way. And it doesn't take very long for people to start to lean on that if they see they can do it consistently. And that's where you get into this accuracy trap that was mentioned before, right? Everyone is laser focused on, oh, it has to be 99.5 or whatever your chosen number is, % accurate. Otherwise, my people are never going to trust it and they're never going to use it. Well, that's not really true. And the point was made before that even if it's only, 90% accurate to start, people will notice that 9/10 of the time it was right. And that's what they'll remember. And then you can start to iterate and build on it and make it more and more accurate over time.
But you've also got 9 times out of 10 it's right, but you've also got to understand that it might be wrong and therefore understand how you make a decision based on that, as opposed to you suffer because it was wrong 10 times.
Yeah, and it depends on what decision you're talking about. And there's some decisions that are a lot easier to do this with others. And so the other thing we encourage is to start with the augmentation on places where the decisions are things that people are more likely to trust more quickly, because that will gain momentum to go to the other harder decisions, right?
And then back on the generative AI topic we were talking about before. So I guess most of us became aware of large language models and generative AI and back in November, maybe earlier, 2022. What have you been doing with Guidewire specifically that you want to point to in that area?
Yeah, so our approach was to do two things. We knew very quickly that we needed to think about generative AI as a capability that was going to be a key cloud capability for our platform, and that we needed to make it a part of our platform in a way that allowed us and our customers to take advantage of it throughout the insurance life cycle. So for both claims, underwriting, everything else that we're doing. So our approach has been to first make sure that we're building enough infrastructure around it to guarantee data security, data privacy, those qualities of service that you need to have a cloud service that you would expect from any cloud service, quite frankly. So we've got to have that in place. And then build on top of that a few examples that we think we can get some really good traction, that we think we can go to market with, and we think we can get adoption very quickly. So there's this difference between building stuff and using stuff. We want to be hyper-focused on how do we get to the using stuff as quickly as possible. While we build that foundation, we're cheating a little bit. We want to build a foundation that's a little bit more durable. So the way that I talk about it is we want to build durable value into the platform around Gen AI. We've started, like I said, with the foundation and the platform aspects, the infrastructure, but then we've picked a couple of use cases which we think show off how you can use that infrastructure and how you can use it to embed it in insurance decisioning. So we've picked, we're actually piloting with a customer, so we're doing some joint work with a customer on piloting underwriting and getting to the point of having a risk analysis document, so automating up to that point. And then the second thing we're looking to pilot next, the next one up, is actually claims summarization. So I know we're here to talk about underwriting, but some of those long tail claims in the world, or injury claims, complex claims, can have thousands of notes on them by the time they're done. And we don't want claims handlers to have to go through that. So leveraging Gen AI for something it's really good at, document summarization, for claims notes, which is harder than you might think, as it turns out.
So I want to ask you a question around that proof of concept idea, actually. Then I want to come back and ask you something you said earlier. So for somebody in the room that is working with Guidewire already and they want to do a proof of concept or a pilot, who do they go to in an organization? Do they come to you directly and an idea? Or how do
you can always come to me directly. Yes, you can always come to me directly, but then also, if you are a Guidewire customer, you should have a customer success manager and account manager that you can also reach out and contact, and they also know how to get a hold of me.
Okay, right. Or just by LinkedIn. And then you mentioned earlier about what I would think about as a democratization of data. So you surface the data for your users. What's the balance between their data, so you're making it easier for them to access their data, which I think you kind of referred to in the claim side, versus third-party data that you might create or might come from third-party offerings? Yeah,
so with regard to what we're doing with Gen AI and in underwriting in particular, I think we think of things more as trusted data sources, right? So whether it's a third-party data source or the customer's own data or something that Guidewire has generated and provided insights on through our data cooperative, that has to be a base data source that the carrier can trust. And that's really what we're focused on, is how do we enable all of those? So whether it's a third party that a carrier is already using, there's a ton of great data sources out there for different types of data, whether it's something that they've chosen as a standard, whether it's something that Guidewire is providing like through Science or Hazard Hub, whether it's insights from data cooperative or transactional data from their core system. We want to make sure that they can access all of it in these processes seamlessly. So that's another thing that we continue to strive towards, as well as being able to see all that information together.
Great, and I believe you're working with some of the other speakers as well in terms of integration into the Guidewire platform.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, and then for people in the audience that are wondering about some of the challenges that come when you use generative AI, people are familiar now with the concept of hallucination. Obviously, insurance companies are being very careful in a regulated environment, but there's even some sort of simpler cases where chatbots and things are now being used to talk to customers. Are there any sort of guidance to anybody that's thinking of using generative AI or anything you've seen either to sort of improve that or just to be looking out for?
Yeah, so this is really interesting, and I think we forget sometimes because ChatGPT and some of these things are sort of consumer tools that you can go in and use, and they kind of work, and you get some cool stuff out of them. That's still an analytics engine, and it still needs to be tested the way that any other analytic would be tested, any other numeric analytic would be tested before you put it into production. So we are going through a process of testing multiple types of techniques, multiple models, in order to make sure that what we provide is sort of the best of breed, that we reduce the hallucinations. We're actually using that augmented generation, the RAG technique that was mentioned before. We're using that. We're also using multi-model technique. And one of the most interesting things that we've seen is this idea of Gen AI actually creating much more interest in using existing analytic techniques, right? So that OCR that we all knew and loved or hated at some point, like that's having a resurgence, because if I still get handwritten forms, I got to do OCR on it before I can do anything with it, right? So what we're seeing is that the interest in Gen AI actually drags also a variety of techniques which don't have some of those problems, which have a much longer history and are much more deterministic in the way that they work, right? So understanding what Gen AI is good at, don't ask it to do math. For God's sake, please do not do that.
Because it will try. It will try to give you an answer. It will try really hard, and
it's not a good idea.
It might be wrong. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but like just trying to use Gen AI where it is good at it and better than other things, and combining that in a solution with these other techniques that are well known. I think that's one thing to do to help some of that. And then the second thing is old traditional testing. We have well understood ways of testing analytics, and they should be applied here as well. It's work.
I'm sure there's a Google tool that can help you do maths. Nigel.
Yeah.
Good. And then finally, Amy, if we behave ourselves and Nigel invites us back next year, what are we going to be talking about that you've been doing in the year ahead, in 2024?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So I mentioned this pilot that we're doing. Hopefully we will be talking about some of the success that we've had with that and that process. That's something we're looking forward to, maybe the claims summarization as well. And then thinking about, for us, just thinking about how Guidewire is extending our underwriting capabilities and some of the rating things as well. Excellent.
Okay. Well, we've got time for a question or two for Amy. So has anybody got a question? We have a microphone somewhere. Does Adrian to stand here?
So you mentioned how recent advances in accelerated computing and deep learning have enabled existing technologies like OCR to become a lot better. Can you maybe give us some examples or even quantify, like how much better are some of these older technologies now, and how are they maybe useful today in ways that they weren't a few years ago?
Yeah, I think it's less about necessarily them getting better so much as them enabling a solution. So what we see is that so often a Gen AI solution is not just, I'm going to apply a Gen AI model to this thing, right? It is first, I'm going to take it in and I'm going to do OCR on it, right? Then I'm going to use Gen AI in one of multiple ways, right? To go from unstructured to structured data or something else. And then once I have that structured data, oh, by the way, I'm going to run that analytic model that you've had sitting on the shelf for the last 3 years that no one knew how to get into an operational system. Well, now I do, right? So then I'm going to run that. And now I'm going to produce you something that's insightful and interesting, right? So in terms of quantification, I can't give you numbers because of that statistic that you saw up there around how many people are actually measuring this. We have the same problem, right? We have some samples from customers of production data, so I can tell you like what happens when we apply those things in serial or in parallel or serial, depending on the particular use case. So I can give you some of that, but it's still a pretty small sample size, and I'm not sure we have enough to say in the real world in production what the numbers look like. But I personally think that this is a game changer for the way that we think about systems entirely. It's not just about making our processes better, it's redefining how we think about what a process is.
Amy, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, again. We're going to break now. We'll come back at 4:05 for the second half. Thank you.